Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 239. I'm delighted to welcome onto the podcast Irvin Mukandi. Irvin, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good, well, just recovering from all the parties, but yeah.
I was just about to touch on that. So for anyone that doesn't know, I'm sure you've seen on the graphic that we put out, Irvin's first team or head of strength and conditioning at Ipswich. And it's been one hell of a season, mate, hasn't it? With days after essentially lifting the second place, confirming that promotion. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been it's been a great season. I have to give credit to all the staff and the performance team and the coaches that we have and the players. It's been a phenomenal year, and it's been world class to see the boys get the credit they deserve as well. So
brilliant. And there might have been a few celebrations, yeah?
There's been plenty. But luckily, I live like an hour and a half away from Ipswich, so I couldn't get party too much. I couldn't get that many Airbnb.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been good. It's been quality.
Brilliant. Well, let's touch on it a little bit. We're going to start on you and your career, so we'll get you to run through that in a second. And I know we're going to dig into the strength program at the club as well and some of the things you've put in place. So start on yourself, mate. What led to the role at Ipswich?
So I started at Bournemouth Uni, where I took a placement year, and then I was S&C for the uni for the Bucks teams, which was a phenomenal role. So I was essentially coaching my mates on a Monday and Tuesday, then out with them on a Wednesday, and then coaching on the Thursday and Friday, out with them Friday night, and then back to it again. But it was a great role because I was on my own. And it meant, I like hockey, football, cricket, like any sport, most sports in a Bucks setup, which was a phenomenal year for me to learn like what I shouldn't do. So for example, everyone did a hanky no matter what sport it was, because I just didn't know any better. Everyone did a deadlift or squat in the same. It just didn't matter. But I learned so much during that time. When I left Bournemouth, went to Queen Mary Uni, where I was an S&C there as well. And again, I was a bit more mature now, but still in the university setting. Did my master's with Middlesex Uni with Anthony Turner and Chris Bishop and John Creed. Those guys were there as well. And I got the chance to work with Anthony with the British Fencing Academy as well. So it was a great time again to learn from lecturers who are also working in an applied setting. And they made S&C seem so simple, which was really, really good for us is in terms of why you do that lift, why you do these drills and like agility or strength or whatever it was. They made it so simple for us. And then from Queen Mary, once working in the US, so left to work to coach football or soccer. I was meant to be there for 9 months on a H2 visa. I think I lasted 2 months. I just thought it wasn't the right job for me, but I didn't know what else I wanted to do, but I just knew this wasn't the right move for me. So I literally drove the car to the airport, called my boss, I quit, flew back without a job. Then got in at Cambridge Uni with Tristan Coles. I was S&C and fitness in there with the rugby, rowing, and the MCC cricket as well. And again, that was meant to be like long term. Maybe it lasted 4 or 5 months. I was just bored. There wasn't enough happening. So quit that, went to work as a lecturer in further education, then realized this is not for me either. Lasted maybe 2-3 months. Quit that without a next job. And then applied for the role at Arsenal Academy. And luckily Des gave me the chance and Paul gave me the chance. I was there for like 7 years. And then from then on, got into Ipswich. But I think Arsenal was really phenomenal for us because we were there for like so long and we all grew up within the actual system itself. And got the chance to work with under 9s, under 23s, and the women's first team as well. So I learned so much during that time. And now here we are, League One, going up.
Amazing, brilliant. I just mentioned before we start recording that Des did have the presentation for us over in Dublin and mentioned yourself and a lot of the other coaches involved in the whole program at Arsenal. And it's obviously a special place, isn't it? Because like you mentioned, stayed there for 7 years. I'm sure there's people that have been there probably longer and similar sort of time. So there's obviously a lot of good stuff going on.
Yeah, I think the best thing about it was we had a framework and we all expressed ourselves within that framework. So you'd never see two sessions the same, with the different, but with me and Sam and Paulie and all, you'd never see that. But the framework was still the same. And it was a great place to be because you never felt like you were the smartest in the room, me personally anyway, which meant you're always learning from other people. So no matter what session it was, whether it was a speed, a strength, pre-training or post-training, there's people doing different things to you. You could always ask them why. Luckily, we had the resources as well in terms of that the facility we had is absolutely world class, but still the basics didn't change. So what's quite interesting is we were in a marquee when I got there for like 2 seasons, just 4 racks and a few benches and dumbbells, and that was it when we were building our new performance center. At that time, we had obviously paper-based plans, and the plan I did at that time and what I did in the new place was actually the same. You know, so the principles never really changed, making boys stronger and more supple. And Des did it in a way where he would never micromanage people, but he was always there for you if you needed to talk to somebody as well and move things forward or change certain things. Yeah, so it was a great time, and I'm so grateful for the boys there and the players as well to where I've got to today.
Yeah, brilliant. You mentioned there about working in a few different sports, some of which you've obviously enjoyed more than others, but was football always where you wanted to end up?
No, not at all. Cricket is where I want to do. So maybe I might still do it one day, but you travel so much. So it's with the family, the young family, so it'll be quite a difficult role to have. So the boys that do it, fair play to them. But cricket was the main passion. I think football, I'm good at learning. So I did my B license, and just because I can learn the principles, and they helped when talking to coaches. But yeah, football isn't. So even now in the role, I'm more passionate about helping people.
Yeah.
So if the athlete was hockey or whatever, I'll be as buzzing as I am right now for what we've achieved, because I'm more attached to helping the individual and not actually to, okay, it's football, great. I'm happy I'm there, but it's more about helping the person really.
Yeah, brilliant. Let's get into a bit of more detail on the program at Ipswich now. So just kick us off with, can you give a little bit of an overview on the program? Obviously, it's a hectic schedule. There's games left, right, and centre in League One, and it's going to be similar, probably going up into the Championship as well. Give us a little bit of an overview in terms of some of the things that you've put in place initially in the program.
Yeah, sure. So just as a starter, it's something that has been put together by the whole team, by the whole performance team. So we have a head of sports science, head of S&C, myself. We have head of medical and the director for performance as well. So everyone's always involved in what we do on what days and why. And so our program is we train, let's say we play on a Saturday, we'll train Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, low day Thursday, prep Friday, play Saturday as well. So with that framework, everyone's passionate about making players better. And that came from the manager as well. The manager and the staff are so passionate about football and making players, but our gaffer came from an academy setting, so he always wants to make players better. So when that was then told to us, I thought, okay, fine, always be the case. So whatever we do is to improve the individual, whether they're going to be staying with us or moving on, or whatever it is, we're still invested in that player, whether they're a starter or not. So with that strategy, we do Monday uppers, Tuesday ISOs, Wednesday lowers, Thursday down day. But if we have an under 21 who's within the first team, they'll do the same, but they'll do uppers on a Thursday as well. They might not play that much come the weekend. So we just wanted to make those players better. But within that framework, it then means we'll look after the individual, but that's basically what we do. So our ISO, for example, is an overcoming ISO day only, which is then linked to an intensive session on the pitch. And on the Wednesday, it's a max speed day, the biggest basis day on the pitch. We do our lowers that day, knowing that we saw on the Wednesday then recover Thursday. And the uppers depends on the individual. So some players working on their axle, for example, will still do clean pulls, snatch pulls of blocks, rather than just bench press pull-ups. It's more so what we're trying to improve on the pitch. How can every session help towards that?
Brilliant. If we can dive in on a bit more detail around the ISO. So what does that look like in terms of some exercise selection now?
Yeah, so again, it's linked. What's really important is, you want to enhance performance, you want to mitigate injury risk as well. So we've linked it really well, where if the outcome is, let's say, working on axle with a player, then we'll do the joint angles that are similar to that position we want to work on. However, it's still long muscle lengths. So we'll do hamstring push, ankle push, is it the seated or against the rack standing, if it's a top speed focus on the rack, if it's axle seated, squat push, wall drill push, mid-thigh pull, with the 3 options for the overcoming ISO as well in that aspect. And again, it depends on what we want to develop with the player. And then we usually then potentiate our ISOs with jumps as well. And the jumps are also linked to what that player needs. So if it's, for example, we'll also do our counter movement jump and RSI assessments. We'll look at the jump strategy for the player and then decide what to work on and why. So if a player has really long essential duration, then they'll be doing more things like drop jumps to try to reduce that time. So it would depend on what that player needs, and we'll then potentiate the jumps with the ISOs on the ISO day.
Real. And how much, in terms of that decision, how much does the position of the player inform that decision as well, does it not?
It will depend. It does to some degree. So you look at what the manager wants from the team. So I don't necessarily talk to the manager and say, what do you want? But as in, you hear the team talks, hear the prep, you know he wants his strikers to press, for example, from like starting position, from like goal kicks, or if they're transitioning to a press, which that then means they have to project well. They have to move across the first 4 or 5 yards quickly. So that's what he wants. We then work on that as well. And then across the whole team as well, we have to consider that the gym is basic. It's like general strength. So you're giving players that foundation to do what they need to do on the pitch. Or in a way, what I learned from Tom Farrow, who's Speedworks, is you want to give the player as much time to make the right or wrong decision on the pitch. So physically, then that means, okay, are you strong enough? Are you fast enough? And then decide what to do. The coach will help you with that process. So it is general to some degree, but we'll go into some specifics when it becomes like axle day. So for example, your centre halves and strikers always do their axle turning and sprinting, as they will do probably on the pitch when they have to do that. It's unlikely you will start in a 2-point starts facing forward, unless the goal kick and you're going to go and press, then fine. But if the ball is in play, you will rarely be just standing waiting to run forward.
Yeah, brilliant. And in terms of the rationale around why the ISO session is where it is during the week, what was the sort of thought process behind that?
So we split it into us. So we do yielding ISOs and we do pushing. The yielding obviously more eccentric in nature, so they go on the Wednesday before the day off. We did them on the Tuesday for the hammies, for example. What you might then find is the players are a bit sore going into their max speed. Whereas if pushes only, they only push as hard as they can on the day. I think you recover quite quickly from those ISOs before there's a big day on the Wednesday. So it was really just around that, and we found with the Monday, Tuesday model, something that then has to give, as in you can't then do everything on that Tuesday session. If we do it on the Thursday, it's a bit too close to the game for the players mentally, that you'd rather do it further away from the game.
Yeah, 100%. And then how does that change as well with like what happens in the leagues in terms of midweek fixtures and the craziness that comes with scheduling as well? How does that change the plan?
Yeah, so that's something that I think I probably need to reflect on this season. Whether we change it, I'm not sure, because we've had very, very little. We only had one soft tissue injury this year, so it has worked to some degree. But if it's a Saturday, Tuesday, and it's the same players playing, then they're just going to recover, really. But the subs, the non-playing group and the subs would load after the game. So if they're playing on a Tuesday, then they might do hamstring holds post-match as they're loading. So they're still, if required, pressure to play on the Tuesday. But if it's a one-game week, the subs on a Saturday will then do a proximal or distal hamstring exercise after they're running. And then they're still sore, but come Monday, they're fine to get back into training already.
So just maximising the time after games to take care of players that haven't necessarily played full games and got the full minutes.
Yeah. So, and it also depends where we are, and you have to look after the player. So if you're away and there's a bus journey and you're going to come back, it's 6 hours on the bus. I'm saying, right, lads, do your RDL, leave that, come do your hamstring holds. They'll be like, Ivan, do one.
Yeah.
They've got a long way to travel, and you got to consider the staff and the player. So then we then pick one thing for them to do rather than doing a lot. But if we're at home and there's enough space, then we might do the holds and the hamstring work post match.
Yeah, brilliant. And just touching back on the acceleration point as well, in terms of developing acceleration, obviously that has been pinpointed by yourselves as a staff from something that the manager wants with the style of play. It's obviously important in the system as well. So can you touch on that a little bit more in terms of how you go about that with the players?
Yeah, sure. So it's what we do with the players is they'll have a prep session on the Tuesday prior to going onto the pitch, and everything that day will be geared towards Axel. So we might then do pause, broad jumps, might do projection drills, wall drills, seated hurdle hops. Everything will be like concentrically based, and that's split between myself, John Ashton, our fitness coach, and Kit Barnes, our assistant sport scientist. So we'll never have one member of staff with the whole squad. It's then split into 3. And then within those groups, you have players who are developing. They're much younger players, or players in the middle, or players who are a bit older. But the whole focus is still on Axel for that day. So all the prep is geared towards that. My group, which the much younger boys, might then do sled work as well before they go onto the pitch. So it just depends who you've got in your group, but the whole focus is on Axel. What then happens after that is the manager will then present what they're doing for the session, and it will usually then be again in small areas where the players have the opportunity to then do more Axel with the session as well. Yeah. And prior to the session starting, the warm-up, well, it's actually not a warm-up, it's an Axel session. Probably shouldn't use that word at all, really.
Yeah.
So they'll start with different start positions, whether it's front, rear, side. They will transition from a pre-action into an Axel and a decel, depending on what that player needs and what the staff think the player needs as well. So the whole system is then set up to flow easily into the session. And the first 2-3 drills that the manager will do with his staff, again, will focus on Axel within the context of the game and the model that they want to use.
It's obviously very important, that link between the work that you're doing and the microcycle, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it is. Because, and I think something I've learned being around men rather than being around like kids when I was with Arsenal is the kids will just do it as you say, but with the older guys you've got to tell them why they're doing it.
Yeah,
and respect where they've come from. So if some players in like previous clubs, when they were coming through and didn't do a lot of work pre-training, you've got to sell that idea to them. Like, we're not going to injure you, but we're going to make you better. and they will always engage more with the context that the coaches put into it. But with the group we have, we've seen a big buy-in as well from the minute we start with the prep work that is linked to Excel. Everyone buys into it. They still compete during that phase before they go into the actual session as well with the coaching staff.
Definitely. This underlines the importance. I know you mentioned before about the UEFA B qualification. I think this underlines the importance of the game understanding as well, doesn't it? Because when you have these conversations with players, this is where it's make or break, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think what we do well is there's always clips in the whole training ground of the game of training. So you can probably then just say to them, look at this, how can we make this better? And you can talk, and it depends which players you're talking to. So some players, the younger ones, where it's more of a big brother jokey kind of relationship, you'd highlight whether things went wrong for them. But not in that, but again, to say this is why we're doing X, Y, and Z. And for us, when we're playing in League One, we want to go and compete in the champ. We have to all assume that's a lot harder physically than where we've just come from. We're actually preparing players for the league above, rather than doing enough to compete against the teams we work against in our own league. So the standards we're trying to set in terms of work ethic and how much we do is to prepare for the league above.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned before as well about the pretty outstanding injury record from this year, which I'm sure in terms of availability has definitely helped with the performances on the pitch. So can we touch on that a little bit, especially around sort of common injuries like hamstrings? Like, what's been the approach to that?
Yeah, so again, the like performance team has been spot on. Like, everyone has an input in what we do in terms of max speed exposure on the pitch and working with the staff. And what the coaches do really well is you know what's coming. As you know it's intensive, you know it's extensive. And we've got such a good culture within the team where even if they come into the gym and they say, that was a hard session, the fact that they've come to tell you means they're willing us to modify the gym session anyway. So they never, rather than saying, it was hard, I'm not going to the gym, or is your hammy a bit tight? Okay, but your calves are fine. You can probably still do knees. You can still do leg press, you can do hip thrust. You just can't do Nordics today, for example. So the culture within the club is absolutely phenomenal, where the guys will still come in no matter how hard the session was. That's the first one. Then the second one is what we've done is we have red, yellow, green gym sessions. So if a player has played every Saturday, Tuesday for the last maybe 3 weeks, it's unlikely then they'll come in a clear week and do a red gym session, which will be the high intensity and volume. They'll go onto green. But if you've played some of the games and all the games, you might do a moderate session. If you haven't played much, you might do a red session. That's the first part. We've then also split the work across the season. So last season, we would do proximal and distal hamstring work on a Wednesday, whereas this year we do one or the other. So if you have let's say it's week 1, you might do trap bar deadlift, you might do Nordics and do your isos and do your calf work and your frontal plane work as well. But the next week, when you're back in again in the gym, you then do split squat, you still do your isos, you might then do seated calf rather than standing calf, you might do taxi lunge rather than lateral lunge, then you do single leg RDL. You would never do both within the same session. So players are now feeling fresher going into the games, but still keeping the strength work going all the time across the year. And then what then happens is, if let's say you were a non-used sub, so if on a Wednesday you did RDL, then on the Saturday after the game you do single leg sideboard. So always going from proximal to distal, from high force to low force. So you never see a player doing RDLs in week 1, Nordics in week 2. It doesn't go between high force and low force, proximal or distal as well.
Brilliant. And has that changed? Do you feel like that's made a big impact to availability for this season?
I think in terms of hamstring health and strength, I think it has definitely.
Yeah.
The players are definitely feeling fresh and going into it, and then you're not sitting on the bench a bit anxious where someone is sprinting and pulling something. That has been the case with us at
Yeah.
all. That's obviously one part of it. The rest of it is still the much exposure they get from the pitches, from the sports science, Andy Costin, and who's worked really well close together to make sure the players are exposed in and out of context of the game, and then the recovery sessions we have on a match day +2, -2, and -1. We've got Pilates, we've got soft tissue, we've got ice bath, we've got flush on the bikes. So we're looking at everything, and that my part contributes to that, to the success that we've had this year, really, in terms of like hamstring health.
Yeah, brilliant. You could tell me that you don't want to answer this question, that's completely fine. But looking towards next season, obviously championship, what are some of the considerations you're going to make for the program going into next year with the difference in sort of intensity of that league?
Oh, do you know what? It's probably something that like it's my first time going into the champ. So one thing Des always said to us was, what was it? Is it's not a revolution, it's an evolution. So you can't start again. You know,
Yeah.
things we've done obviously have worked this year. How do we then push it forward into next year? So one thing we've done is in the off season, the players' plans, they will do proximal and distal in the same session because playing any games. So again, it's still diverse. So they might do, for example, you might do RDL, might do prone hamstring curl in like week in like one session. They'll do 2 sessions that week. In the other session, they might then do Nordics, might then hip thrust. So they'll come back with a much bigger base, I hope. Then we then go back to our 1 per session model, I feel. But maybe more volume or more in intensity in season because they're coping with them more. But I think we also have to be careful you don't empty the tank the same time that the coaches empty the tank.
Yeah.
Training will be hard, obviously. And I can control and modify gym a lot easier than you can ask the manager to modify for 8 players during a session. Football always comes first, then I then work off how the players are feeling and what they've done on the pitch.
I get that sense in speaking to you. There's very much a cohesive approach to everything you're doing. Everyone's involved. Everyone's pulling in the same direction, whether it's gym, pitch, physio, rehab.
Yeah. I think it has to be. And again, it's probably like a reflection of mine is like, we're not as important as you think you are. Like there's more to it than just getting the players strong, you know? Because you're part of a bigger process. So they're there to play football.
Yeah.
They have to be able to do that every day and do what the manager requires of the intensity that he requires from them as well. So all I'm doing is giving them the opportunity to do that and doing my bit, you know, to help the coaches and the team and the club to move forward. But I think if you feel as if your kingdom is the most important one, then you might then do more than you need to, you know? And the players will always, again, they'll tell me how they feel, but they now know the plan. So, like, the players will know that, oh, last week I did RDL, I didn't really, this week I've got X, you know?
Yeah.
You've got to then work with players. So some players, for example, say, I don't like doing Nordics. I can't then impose Nordics on them because they're still doing distal hamstring work with the prone hamstring and the slide board. So they've still got that aspect in their session anyway. Or the physio will say, this guy has got a stiff back. I can't then do RDLs or split stance RDLs with that player. We've got a Kaiser machine. So you can still get them on their back and do leg lowers with them slight bend. It's still a proximal hamstring exercise still. So you still find ways to still get the work in, but you're adapting to what the physio tells you and what the player tells you as well.
That's just being creative as a coach, isn't it? And understanding basically understanding the rationale why you're doing something. And if the plan needs changing, it's easily changed then, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's the case, and I think you also learn more from like other sports. So Jeff Robinson, one of our S&Cs, he's now left to go to Ipswich School. Worked with Alex Wolf, did the S&C Academy, and they use the outcome-based approach. And it's something that I'm trying to embed into what I do every day. So I'll always learn from everyone around. So again, why am I doing this? Or how will that influence what this player is doing on the pitch? So then you need to match up the outcome and the health of the player and make sure both are going to influence what you're picking why within the player.
Yeah, brilliant. I want to just move it on now because I know this ties in with your PhD as well, which I know you can touch on. But in terms of post-match fatigue testing, what's been the setup that you guys have put in place for that?
Yeah, so it's something that we didn't do much of last season, but then I'm working with like Anthony and Crystal, like this is an opportunity here. I was like, yeah, I'll take it. So it's embedded within the club. So this season we've done counter movement jump, we've done Kangatech adductor squeeze, we've done prone isometric hamstring. We then changed to supine at 90 degrees on the force plates, looking at our peak force, and then we use POMs as well. Just we take sleep, mood, muscle soreness out of 5. You pick each one. The players do it on the app on our Kitman Labs, and then we get all the data through. And you're trying to find what's sensitive to fatigue. Now, this season, at the moment, as much as everyone says, you know, jump strategy will show that they're tired, on a group level, jump height is still more sensitive than all the other metrics in terms of saying, okay, is this player tired or not? Because they can still alter their strategy so they can, their duration, for example, might still be good, but they've altered it, but their jump height is still poor.
Right.
So we kind of looked at all these metrics, thinking about what's the best thing to do. So for next season, I think we're going to dial it down and look at jump height, the POMs, mood, and sleep on a match day +2 don't really tell you much. Whereas muscle soreness is the one that's more sensitive again of the 3. Kangatech is good. It does show fatigue using effect sizes on a group level. And then for the hamstring ones, the challenge there is players to engage and do the test. So you want a maximal effort. So we were doing pro and ISO, and there were some complaints. So we went to supine 90, and that was actually more sensitive than the pro and ISO. And again, players were doing more of the test. So it's only players that have played over 60 minutes on the Saturday, we then test them on the Monday. So that's the first part of the PhD, to find out, you know, what's sensitive and why. And probably a good place to start with this is we're going to be sending out a survey as well to see what happens in elite football. Like, what do people do and why, and how do you assess how sensitive the test is to say, yes, he's tired, no, he's fine. He can then carry on training. And we tend to test on the Monday. On the Monday, we know it's a light day anyway. So if somebody's then flagging all the tests, you then test them again Tuesday. And if they're still fatigued, then we tell the coaches, okay, we can look at this player. And at that point, I'll then modify my work in the gym if it's a clear week as well. So if you're flagging on the Tuesday, there's no point in me saying, right, I want 5-second grinds of everything in your ISO session. I'll then modify that, maybe 3-second explode instead. I'll then take away all the appliers in that session as well. And then on the Wednesday, then go onto a low, like a green session, rather than doing like orange or red when you're still fatigued, but the player will still train.
Brilliant. So when do you think the survey will get sent out?
So we're hoping to do it in at the end of at the start of the off season. So very, very soon I'll probably be reaching out to you again to help to get it out there. It's again to see what people do and how they measure it. So for example, if you use baseline data as saying this is when they're fresh, and then you assess them against that, they probably will show fatigue because they're not fresh. But across the season, they'll always flag up red if you use baseline data, or do you use a rolling average instead? And then do you use one standard deviation from that, or do you use worthwhile change? Is it 0.2 times the ST? What do you use and why, and what's happening across the industry really, to then find out what's the best way, because this will then be reported back to everyone that gives the data within hopefully 2 weeks, so that we can all share it and know this is how to look at post-match fatigue within a football setting.
Brilliant. Well, when it's all set and ready to go, send it me. And anyone listening, check the show notes, because we'll put it in the show notes as well. So you can go into the show notes, click it, and then hopefully get involved as well. Ivan, I just want to finish up on this around the importance of the academy as well, and the academy program feeding into the first team in terms of that. You mentioned before Arsenal, the framework, the sort of vision of getting players through. So can you touch on that just a little bit in terms of some of the things you put in place?
Yeah, sure. So we've got a very talented academy set up. Andy Langford does it under 9 to under 16. We've got Craig and we've got Nikos in the PDP phase. And the assistant that I've got now, Danny Nye, came from British weightlifting. So he's not from a football background. And that's really, really important to have this diverse approach to developing players. Once the players get to the first team and they can't do a hand clean or they can't back squat, and we're playing Saturday, Tuesday, it'd be very difficult to try and learn those things new. We'll still find ways, we'll still do a trap bar, leg press, we'll still find ways to get them strong, but the more competent players are coming through, the better, because you've only got certain windows to make people more powerful in a way. So
yeah,
they have to be comfortable to lift before training. But if you're doing it since you're under 12, when you get to first team, you then carry on doing it. But if I then started with you, when you get to the first team, we'll spend the first year just getting you to be okay with it. You're not doing a trap bar jump of 30 kilos. That's doing nothing for you until you feel, okay, all right, I can do this now, and then move things forward. So what we try to do is have really efficient movers from under 12 coming through. And one thing I learned from Perry, who's now leading at Arsenal, is if you've got an actual framework in place and it doesn't work, you know why. You can go back and look at it. If it works, you also know why. You carry on and you make it better. But if you just do as you see fit, this month you learn this, I'll try that or whatever, then you'll never know why things went well or didn't go so well. So people will always talk about the big players that came through the academy Arsenal, which they're great. Bukayo, Rezzil, brilliant. But there's so many other players who are maybe not playing in the Prem, also came through their system and are still playing in Champions League 1 and abroad. And it goes to show that the framework did its job really in producing players that are robust enough to handle men's football. And what I've also learned being at Ipswich is it's different to being at Arsenal. Is a player at Arsenal going loan to us or to the champ, so you will look after them. Whereas a player who's in the academy to us will go on loan national league, or might go even lower divisions. So if that kid doesn't know how to look after themselves and what to do in their own time, they'll come back worse off. We can say, right, go and do a clean, go and do a squat, but they have to know when to do it, why I'm doing it, and how to do it as well in their own time. So you've then got to develop individual learners within that process as well. I think having a framework that everyone understands from a staff perspective is then easy enough to apply it to the kids.
Brilliant. I know that section alone could probably be a whole different podcast, but it's just
Yeah,
good to
yeah,
get your
yeah. No,
insight into that.
yeah, and I think most coaches will still enjoy working with young players only because they actually want to do the work and there's more, we can see more potential, you know.
Yeah.
So if obviously being available is really, really good, but then as the S&C, it's making people better is still my main target. And I think if your focus is to improve players, make them better, then they're going to be available anyway, because they're obviously stronger and more like powerful and faster. So, and you will see that more with the younger players. So there's still a passion for that. So, for example, even though I'm with the first team, I will still help out with the under 15s on a Saturday morning when the schedule lets me, because we're not a big club. So you need everyone to still help across the whole pathway. And the new guy coming in, Danny, will work with the under 21s, support the first team, but also then influence under 12s, 13s, 14s, 15s, because he actually knows weightlifting better than me anyway. That's where he's actually come from. So it's having a staff that are smart enough and humble enough to work with anybody within the club is also very, very important.
That also helps with the transition for players as well, doesn't it? If they recognise the face and they've worked with you before, it's a much easier transition.
Totally. And I think if a player trusts you when they were under 14 and then now in the first team and something goes wrong, they'll still trust the process anyway.
Yeah.
Important to have that relationship with like everyone across the club, really.
Brilliant. Ivan, some great information in there, so thank you for that. Let's move on to the questions we always finish the podcast with, so some of the quick fires. Who have been some of the biggest influences on your career so far?
So it's actually the people, it's actually not how good they are at the jobs, really. It's how they've made me feel and they've made me evolve as a person. So Kate Green was our head of the psych department at Arsenal Academy. She was phenomenal. Des Ryan, Perry Stewart, Paulie Roach, Sam Wilson, Noel Carroll, all those guys, we grew up together, you know, in the academy, and it was a great time to be around that. And I think probably Chris Bishop and Anthony Turner are great guys only because they've made S&C seem so easy. Mm-hmm. Like we said earlier, there's this app and this data, there's this now, but it's still the basics have never really changed. And that's been really important for me. And I think now Andy Rose, my current line manager, he sits across the desk from me because our office isn't big enough to have him have his own office. So I now see what he does daily, and I'm thinking, I'm not sure I want to do that, or I do or I don't. But it's so good to learn from somebody from a different discipline. Again, he came from a physio background, but it's how he treats people every day. That's a big lesson for me, really.
Brilliant. What would you say your biggest strength is as a practitioner?
I think reflecting on the program and reflecting on the interactions with players and staff is really important. So you want to build relationships with staff and players, but you also have to reflect on how you behave and how you think they felt. And I think that's something I'm really conscious of, because in the role I'm in now, I don't have to be on the pitch every day, which means you've got time within the day to plan, train, and reflect on how that session or how that block has been.
Yeah.
With players.
Brilliant. If you were able to have a discussion with Ivan back when he was working with the Bucks teams, in terms of career, what would be your top bit of advice?
I'd say travel more, as in go traveling more, as in see the world more. Nothing to do with actually S&C or sport. Yeah. Because I think in what we do, once you come into it, you can't leave and think you get back in where you've left. Everyone wants the jobs, but the more life experience you have as a young person will only then help when you do enter the sport, you know. And probably the more different sports you can learn from, the better you be at whatever sport is the right one for you if S&C or sports science is the way you want to go.
Yeah, that's an important point as well, isn't it? Because like we mentioned before, football wasn't necessarily where you wanted to end up, or even where you do end up, but opportunities come, don't they?
Yeah. Like, because I think really it's helping people. If that's what you want to do, then you could do it in most things. If you want to do it in S&C, then that's still got to be the main driver, is to help somebody achieve their own potential. And then if you take pleasure from that, then, great.
Awesome. Final question, mate. In terms of CPD or continued development, what's your approach to that now?
It's so diverse now. Probably try and read a lot more. So currently I've finished Simon Sinek Infinite Game, Rebel Ideas by Matthew Said, Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah.
That's right. Black box thinking. All those principles will have an effect on what I do daily. I'm not saying I know everything about S&C. That's not it at all. I'll still learn from people like Jonas, Stu McMillan, Alex Wolf. You still learn all the time, but you have to then have the skills to apply that within your own context. And sometimes you haven't got to change a lot. Hence, black box thinking helped me last year. In the last season, I was like, right, the players were a lot stronger using the Nordboard assessment, but we'd had a few more soft tissue injuries. Obviously, they happen for a different reason, injuries, not just one thing. Yeah. But I was thinking, okay, so that happened last year. What have I got to change this year within what I can control for a better year? And we did that again by reflecting as a department, the whole performance team, and then me myself within that as well, to use the approach I've used this year to help mitigate injuries but still enhance performance. So I think, again, so none of that really was bumper or super training. It was just really learning from probably business. And the role I'm in now as head of S&C, what I enjoy the most is coaching. But what you've got to do, get better at, is actually leading people. And that's a completely different skill set that I'm happily saying I'm still need to get better at. I'm still passionate about why you're doing calf raise and not seated, or why you're doing that ISO or that ISO, which is important, but you have to inspire people to do the right thing and express themselves as well. So I think my CPD will go more towards leadership, really.
I think reading books like that and resources like that just reminds you of certain aspects, or maybe challenges you in different ways as well, doesn't it? So like you say, it's not necessarily testing your technical knowledge of something, but it might make you just open your mind a little bit more and think, well, what about if we did change that? And what about if we did make that change?
Yeah. I think like you always learn from other disciplines and like even other departments within their own club of how they lead and manage people. Like, for example, our head of facilities came from the army, and he's shorter than me. And when he talks, I stop and I listen. And I just want to. I want to have that skill set to so you can always learn from like different people. And so I think if I spend the day with him, I would learn about how to
100%.
Easy. And so I think you probably forget how much you've got within your own environment that can actually help you improve without even looking outside yet.
That's a great point. Yeah, I think that's a really good takeaway for coaches as well, is literally look at who are around you right now and who you can learn from. Because I completely agree with you. I think we can learn from absolutely everyone.
Yeah, and even when I listen to the managers' team talks post-match, I'm not listening to necessarily the messages, how he delivers that message. Okay, everyone's listening here. He's not shouting,
No.
But you are thinking, okay, you are listening. You are like, I'm taking it on board, because there were times in the season where we were drawn a few games, but nobody panicked. We still knew what the outcome was. I didn't then change it. I think, okay, we played this many games. Maybe now I'll do only 2 sets. The process did not change. You can still reflect and keep things the same, but you're always learning from everyone on how they talk to people, how they make people feel, really.
I think the other lesson on that is, I know you mentioned you got a young family. Try and speak to kids. Try and get your
yeah.
kids to do anything.
Oh yeah, well, she's only like 18 months, so I'm still in the
Oh,
stage
okay.
where
Okay, you got it to come.
I'm like learning every day. She's teaching at the moment, so it's just absolute chaos.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Oh, it's just certainly to come.
yeah.
I mean, that's been absolutely brilliant, mate. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast. If people want to reach out, they want to chat about anything, or just literally reach out with any questions, where would you direct them? Where do you spend your time?
You know, I don't post anything on Twitter ever. I'm on Twitter just to steal ideas.
Yeah.
So everything I've got, nothing of it is actually mine, I feel. So I'll probably give like my like email address. I want to talk over the best way really is like email address. Really.
Perfect. Well, if anyone wants that, drop me an email and then we can always put that out. But no, thank you for coming on, mate. We've covered some great stuff there. Again, congratulations on this season. I'll be keeping an eye out for next season as well. And yeah, thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you very, very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.